we have absolutely a very eminent panelist today. They are expert of the field, and not only in India, they are globally known persons. So, in the line, I would request Dr. P.C. Sarkar first. Sir, I would request you to just throw your light, throw your deliberations on the subject and share your experience with us regarding the use, readaptation, or the development of the heritage building. Sir, Dr. Sarkar.
Thank you, Anuj. Thank you, organizers. Thank you, participants. I hope my voice is going to you. You can hear me? Okay, fine. So, I'll just give a very brief general overview of the subject of what I feel, because here I am not as a expert. I am as a layman. I am as a stakeholder who is interested but who is not actually involved in the restoration or reuse or adaptation process. But in the long run, we see that it is the layman who is the most important person, because he is the important stakeholder. He is a member of the public, and ultimately he is the one who will benefit from any adaptation or any reuse which we create in the long run. So this topic, as I see reuse and readaptation, maybe we could have added restoration also. This is basically very close to my heart, and personally, I would like to just share the thought that I often visit ruins, and especially ruins and ghostly structures and broken palaces and forts, and these affect me very much. And I always feel that what would have been the situation when this palace or this fort was functioning? How would the people, they have been living their lives? What would have been their lifestyles? What tragedies, what happy moments occurred in these buildings? And now the question is, can this building, can this structure be restored? Can it be again reused? So these thoughts, when they come into my mind, then ultimately I come to this kind of discussion and I share my views. So to my mind, or to my whatever little experience I have, 4 or 5 very important factors come into play, and I'd like to discuss them briefly because I think I have 12, 30 minutes. So the first thing, as I said, was that I have an emotional connect, and I feel that in this kind of work, an emotional connect is very necessary, because unless we are somehow mentally attached to this kind of work, we may not really succeed. Now you see, all of us are sitting here, and we are not getting paid, and we are not getting any work, and yet we are all sitting and contributing and giving a time. Why? Because I feel that we have an emotional connect with this subject, and that is the most important factor in this kind of work. That is my personal feeling. Secondly, when we go into this kind of activity, I feel that the locus standi of the person or the organization is also very important. This is a very practical thing I'm telling, because often we go about in a city or maybe a place where it has got a lot of infrastructure, and we feel bad that some building is falling apart or some house is falling apart, and then we start cursing other government agencies that what it is not doing, what why is not doing, why can't we do? Then the question of the locus standi is there, that what is our legal standing? Can we just walk into a building and say that we will restore, or this should be restored? This is legal matter, and this is also a social matter. It may be somebody's house, he will not like it. I have visited places in which the owners, they became very irritated when we went inside and we just examining. So, local standi of the person concerned or the organization concerned appears very important to me. Otherwise, walking inside or simply due to our emotional attachment, we try to intervene, may not be very fruitful in the long run, unless the title, deed, everything is very clear. The owner himself wants that some activity should be done, or the government agency, or whatever is the controlling authority of the building, they should be willing, they should give their consent that yes,
लोग
we want an intervention.
बहुत
So
गर्म
that is
हुआ
the
रहा है,
second
सुनाई
point,
नहीं पड़
very
रहा है.
important. Thirdly, I feel that an administrative support is also very necessary, because we see that when we take up this kind of work, we face lots of problems, and these maybe from the encroachers, and maybe from due to multiple ownerships and lost deeds and lost rights, and owners who suddenly appear, who were never in the picture for the last 50 years or 100 years, but suddenly they appear and they want their rights. And then maybe the forest department and maybe the municipal authority authorities and X number of authorities come into play. And that is the point in which we need very strong administrative support, very strong maybe political support also, and the political will to do that ye kaam karna hai. Otherwise, if we get lost in all these issues of say municipal or forest department or whatever, then a lot of delay occurs and ultimately the project suffers. The project gets delayed and also the budgeting gets disturbed. So this is, I feel, another very important thing that the political and the administrative will and support should be very necessary. If a CM of a state is determined to say renovate X structure, then I think we'll be in a very favorable position. Or if a very powerful authority, a very powerful NGO, or like maybe or maybe other fund foundation, very influential people, if they intervene, then a person is in a safe position. But as an individual or as a group of people going around and saying, "Oh, we want this done, we want that done," and we've been doing it in Lucknow and facing lots of problems also. I'm not going to specific. Maybe Madam Bhashne will go into specifics. I'm just going into general aspects. So administrative and political support is also very necessary. Then comes the technical expertise. So we all know that okay, engineers are very essential, the architects are very essential, the artisans are also very essential because ultimately they will be carrying out the groundwork of the restoration. Ultimately, which will lead to the reuse and the adaptation of the heritage structure. You also need historians who will give you genuine inputs as to what was the original structure, what was the original use pattern of this particular building. Otherwise, if one gets lost in a maze, we see that in a span of say 100 years or 150 years, say 100 years, a building gets modified on its own by its original owners. Take for example, maybe Dilkusha. What we see in Dilkusha Palace today is not the original Dilkusha which was made during the times of Sadiq Ali Khan. It underwent restorations and renovations at many stages. So when we talk of restoration or we talk of reuse, what do we want to restore? The original Sadat Khan structure or the last one, maybe Wajid Ali Shah structure? What do we want to restore? So that is another very important point which comes to my mind, that we have to set our mind as to what we want to restore. At what point of time we want to intervene and then start the reuse and the readaptation of the particular structure. Funding, of course, very important because no money, no work, even for a cup of tea you need money, if everything you need money, with internet connection also costs money. So funding is very important and that too continuous funding. We have seen examples in Lucknow in which restoration work was started and then due to a change in government policy and change in government, the funds were somehow delayed and the work stopped. So that is a very big tragedy that beautiful works are getting delayed and then ultimately we do not aim what we were fighting for. So funding, of course, is necessary. The funding can be government, it can be from an NGO, it can be from a philanthropist, it can be from an industrial house or a business or whatever. But that should be consistent and it should be very, very substantial. Otherwise, in the shortage of funds, the work suffers and ultimately we never achieve the goal. So these factors to my mind are very important in this work which we are proposing, that is the reuse and readaptation. Um, I've, in my whatever little experience I have been having and I've had, I see that this restoration and reuse throws up a lot of new information. Madam Vashne may be discussing about Chakra Mandir, I'll not talk about it. But during restoration, personally I have visited many structures and I see that many misnomers are cleared and that is very important from an academic point of view, not maybe from an architect point of view or engineer's point of view, but from maybe a amateur historian's point of view. Some very interesting thing I'll share. Um, like we see a particular structure X, I'll not take a name, and that is being restored, so the plastering is being removed. And now what do we see is that instead of the usual Lahori bricks of the Nawabi period, we see modern bricks. So what is happening? Entire walls, rooms, stairways, they are having modern bricks. So that is the puzzle which needs to solve. Now bricks have got the date. So we see the date and the date comes to 1906. So a point comes to my mind that at some maybe point in history, this building might have been restored by the British in 1906. Now, what happened in Lucknow was that after 1857, many of the palaces and structures were demolished and removed, but few were retained by the British and they were patched up and they were put to different uses. And that was, say, 1858, 1859, and that work continued till 1870. But here we are seeing restoration of 1906. So that means after about another half a century, that work was again either continued or restarted anew. And what we are restoring today is not the actual Nawabi structure. Maybe 70% of the Nawabi structure is already gone. We are restoring a semi-hybrid structure of the British and the Nawab. So that is a very interesting thing. That is, to my mind, very interesting. Another secret, or you can say a misnomer, which got cleared up was like during the restoration process in Lucknow buildings, that Lucknow doesn't have very many stone structures because there was a shortage of stone supplies, so no marble, no red sandstone, nothing. So they all depended on bricks and mortar. But historians will tell us that Lucknow used to have two structures of made of stone, one in the Machi Bhavan and one was the Lal Baradari, which is occupied by the Lalital Academy now. And people will say that Lalital Academy building, the Lal Baradari, is actually made of stone but painted it with red paint, so it will look like red stone, like a red fort. Again, a misnomer, because when it was being restored, we saw that there is no stone at all. It is again made of bricks, no stone at all. Lucknow has another stone complex, and that is the Nadan Mill complex, but people don't really talk about it. It is mainly the Lal Baradari. So, you might mind these secrets, they come up and they clear a lot of misinformation and misnomers, and I find them very interesting. When something is dug up, when something is opened up, and then these secrets come out, and then people are interested, and of course, it's fascinating for them. As far as this reuse readaptation is concerned, I personally feel that it can be of two types. It is of two types. One is the reuse which corresponds to the original use. There I find that the disturbance to the original structure is minimum and the readaptation is also very important. For example, a school like Lamartine School from Tensia is restored and it is again put to use as a school. So no issues there. Totally parallel issue, like supposing tomorrow we say that Chandramandir can become a cultural center or Chandramandir can become a museum. In fact, the British have been doing it. They use many of our old palaces for use as a library or museum or cultural center or club and whatever, and modified it accordingly. Now the question is that when we restore a building, and that during the restoration we always complain that see so much damage has occurred due to the modern drainage systems and distributions and small ceilings and the electrical pipes and the air conditioning, and that has damaged the original building and it has to be removed, and then the original structure has to be restored. Fine. But when we put it to a modern use, like we convert a palace to a convention center, then again we have to go into the waste management, the water supply, the air conditioning, everything, the lighting, everything. And once we start intervening in that direction, then the disturbance also occurs in the basic structure. So what are we doing? We are basically replicating what happened 50 years ago, what the British did, and what the later governments of 1947 did. We are again doing the same thing. That we are introducing air conditioning ducts and we are introducing waste management systems and water systems. So the original structure is getting disturbed. Or we are supposing you want to use an office, so naturally the cubicles will be there and the whole ceiling will be there, and ultimately the structure gets disturbed. So what is the option in this? Either you use the palace as such, or you modernize, you use the palace for a modern use, and then of course for the modern use you have to do modern interventions. So that we have to strike a balance, and that balance also has to be a very proper balance. Either way, there's a big ditch. So I feel that either we have to decide in the beginning itself that what kind of reuse we are going to do. Like in Lucknow only, a number of palaces have now been restored and they are lying vacant. Because now there's a question of how to use them. The hotel, the Rajasthan model, use them as hotels, use them as a convention center, use them as a museum. How many museums, how many hotels? So this question of reuse becomes very important because Then my last factor which I would like to say is the socio-economic return. Because in today's scenario, that socio-economic issue is very, very important. That economic model, the cost benefit ratio, these come into picture, and then there's a big problem because not all hotels can generate a profit, and museum of course will never generate a profit. And when once you spend so much money on a particular activity and then you fail to generate that kind of revenue, then you think it's so. Coming to the end of my presentation, I would like to say that all these 5 or 6 factors which I have discussed, they are important. They may not be very, very obvious, but they are important. They serve as the foundation to all this activity, and at some point of time, they have to be content. Now, I have 3 minutes left, so I'll just give a presentation on a restoration and a reuse activity, successful activity of a structure in West Bengal, because currently I'm posted in Calcutta. So I'll do a very short presentation of what happened there. So over to my presentation. Can you see my presentation, gentlemen? Friends, can you see? Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I'll go very fast, but it will be very interesting, I'm sure. That this is the case of a Danish tavern in Srirampur, West Bengal, and I'll show you how it was done and what was the end result. So we all are aware of the polycolonial legacy of West Bengal. How the Portuguese first landed up in Bengal, and the Dutch in Srirampur, the French in Chandanagar, and the British in Calcutta. They were all along the single, say, line along the Hooghly, on one side of the Hooghly River, and they all set up their establishments, their factories, and their administrative offices. So I'll deal with Srirampur, that was the Dutch center. The Dutch controlled Srirampur from 1755 to 1845, so around 90 years, and then they gave over their interests to the British. There was this tavern cum hotel, which was built on the banks of the Hooghly River by a gentleman called James Parr. And this Dutch tavern was a very popular one because in those times, can you imagine, it served very good food and very good accommodation, and people would just come by boat ride from Calcutta. And not only the Dutch would enjoy the facilities and the hospitality of this tavern, but even the British, they would also come and they stay overnight and enjoy the food and the liquor and whatever. And a lot of advertisements can also be found in public domain about this particular tavern. This tavern has also been mentioned in several books and also served as a center for the war discussions and political problems, and that is why the British had a particular you can say affinity or disgust for this tavern, because of course at one point of time the Dutch and the British were at loggerheads in Europe. So when they were fighting in Europe, that tension spilled over to Srirampur also. If you see the tavern, this is a very old painting of a tavern. You see that it is on the side of the river Hooghly, and people can come by the ships or the boats and can directly climb over the bank. And you see on the left hand side, you see the administrative buildings of the Dutch administration, the flag, and on the right hand side, you see the tavern. This is the appearance of the tavern in 2015. Now you see the most of the building has fallen apart. Only the frontage is from the road side, you can see from the river side, it is totally gone. So almost totally gone. It was being used as a go down for the police department. They would store the discarded cycles and vehicles and all this, and it was declared as dangerous and hazardous. So this tavern was how it came to be, but I'll tell you. But the work on the restoration of this tavern started, and you can see that it is almost being completely rebuilt because the original structure is almost gone. So whatever we see now, is almost a new structure. Internally, it is totally new because the good work, everything is gone from inside. So it is being rebuilt, and maybe 70% is being rebuilt, 30% is the old one. This is the restored Taiwan in 2018. Now it's functioning. So it's just a comparative study of the modern view of people, how they can come by a launch and they can enter the Taiwan from the river side and the old one. Some more pictures of the restoration. Care has been taken to emulate the old patterns, old construction materials, but still you see some steel barriers and of course modernization is another huge restoration. And these are the details of the project that it was reopened in 2018. You saw how it was fading in 2015. Stakeholders of this project were the National Museum of Denmark, the West Bengal State Heritage Commission, that Shriram Initiative, which was a body of the Dutch government, and VR Dania, which the money was channeled. The project was Bentwood of Netherlands. The budget was 5 crores. The conservation architect was Manish Chakrabarty. So with this, I end my project, my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and if there's any question, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for your sharing your experience and your project over there. Good, absolutely good. Little bit disturbance of the sound is there. I am suppose the people will bear with it. You have shown this, but we as Lucknowites, sir, I can tell you, we are really proud of our inheritance, and some of our heritage buildings are absolutely second to none in the world. I'll now come to our second panelist, architect Mrs. Vipul Varshney, architect by profession and heritage enthusiast by, we can say by choice, we can say by passion. Now, she has already documented lot of heritage buildings in Lucknow, digitized their drawings, and she has done a lot of work. So, Mrs. Varshney, I'm just coming to you, Vipulji. Just let us know on this part of the thing that we have number of heritage buildings in Lucknow which can be used, which can be readapted, but still we are not doing it. What is the factor which is restraining us to do it, and how do you feel that we should go ahead in this motive to use or to readapt our buildings or our premises to take care of the present need of the development? Mrs. Vipul, architect Vipul, please.
Ma'am, you will have to unmute, please.
Yes.
Yeah, good evening, everybody, respected panelists, the audience, and of course the organizers who have made an effort to talk about heritage last in the priority of the development projects. It's not good to say, but that's the reality. India is a developing country, and still after 70 years of independence, it is almost sort of last in the priority list of planners and whatever the plans of the government. So now good thoughts put forward by Dr. Sarkar, and lot of brainstorming can be taken forward by the points put forward by him. Now, as I feel, he had put forward restoration versus readaptation was also one of his points. So, some thoughts from my side about why readaptation and restoration, of course, is important, but why readaptation? Now, India is a developing country, as we all know, and government has definite number of protected monuments or buildings through his agency ASI or state agencies, state ASIs, still there are number of unprotected buildings scattered all over the country. Now, what do we do? How as a community, as a society, as denizens, where you may call NGOs or whatever, in whatever language, technical terminology we may put in, how to conserve them, how to protect them, how to prolong their life for our future generations. Now, that's where I come, I put this point. The city is alive when it is evolved. It evolves, it should always evolve. And it is dead when it's embalmed. I put in my FB post also, but I like this phrase. It's by a very famous heritage expert. So I believe in this point because the heritage buildings, if you are not making them evolve, we do not respect them, we do not honor them. Why? Because they are not proving their potential to the contemporary needs of the society. To cater to the contemporary needs, they have to evolve, and we should rather assist them to cater to our present need. That's one viewpoint.